Welcome back to the Everything is Black and White podcast. Andrew Musgrave here. Hope you guys are all doing well. I'm back after a few days off. Big thanks to Mark Crothers for stepping up and hosting the podcast in my absence. I do hope you enjoyed the shows. As always, we are sponsored by NordVPN. Do click the link in the podcast description box. Take advantage of your exclusive discounted offer on your NordVPN plan. No risk with a 30-day money-back guarantee. It is an absolute pleasure to be back in the hosting chair talking about yet another Newcastle United victory. 5 out of 6 in October. That is brilliant form. I yet to say that Newcastle are at their very, very best. I think that's actually coming down the road. On Wednesday night, they made light work of Tottenham Hotspur. No club, at least in the Premier League, had taken more points on the road this campaign than Thomas Frank's Tottenham Hotspur. So I was expecting a little bit more of a test. Newcastle made 8 changes. Tottenham made 4. Both still very strong sides. And yet I left St James's Park in good spirits. Of course, Newcastle had won. But just thinking Newcastle had dominated that game, deserved to win, and it was relatively easy. I was sitting there thinking, this is rather nice during the game. Newcastle United under the lights at St James's Park, playing relatively good football, having it quite comfortably, no injuries, goals, big performances by players that needed it, and then through to the next round. And that momentum continuing, winning in every competition, making sure you're winning your home games after what has been a slow start. I always maintained they were just building ahead of steam. And I think, as I say, the best is still yet to come. I get into the car and I listen to Eddie Howe's press conference. He talks about Newcastle not having it all their own way. I do think that's probably been a little bit nice to Tottenham, to be quite honest. They had 2 shots of any note, and that were in the second half. Aaron Ramsdale saving from Richarlison. I can't quite remember who the other shot came from, but it was a great save low down to his left. There was a few other efforts on goal, and in fact, the stats do paint a closer game than I must have been watching. Tottenham had 11 shots in total, 6 on target. Newcastle had just 3 on target. But yeah, it didn't seem like Newcastle were ever under any real stress, ever in any real danger at all. For me, there was only one side that wanted victory, that wanted to progress, and that was Newcastle United. Even with 8 changes, it was still, as I say, a very, very strong side. And you look at what other managers around the Premier League have done in this competition, and it does get a little bit disrespected, I think. I think Thomas Frank actually played as strong as a team as he could, given injuries. But let's not forget, Newcastle United are suffering from 2 or 3 injuries as well of key players, and more on that on a moment. But Eddie Howe has always maintained that he wants to win this cup again. He wants to do what he did earlier this year when he ended that trophy drought. And look at the team he played. 8 changes, and automatically you assume it must be a weakened side. But you had Sandro Tonali in that side. You had Malik Thiaw, Nick Woltemade, players who've been playing week in, week out for Newcastle United recently as they've gone on this good run of form. Eddie Howe taking this competition very seriously, and you saw that with the names on the team sheet. Don't let the number of changes cast an aspersion. Newcastle United taking this very seriously, and you saw that as well by those players who came in, the likes of Joe Willock, the likes of Fabian Schar, taking their opportunity to impress, because their chances of getting a sustained run in the first team are going to be limited. It seems like Eddie Howe's finally settled, injuries aside, on his best 11. There's, of course, going to be rotation with so many games in the calendar, but I do think Eddie Howe, for the most part, has his starting 11, and I don't think it includes Fabian Schar, and it certainly doesn't include Joe Willock. So for them to put in the performances that they did against Spurs on Wednesday night was really, really important, and they were just one of many players who impressed. And we're going to hear from Eddie Howe in a bit about Joe Willock and why he was very pleased for the man. We're also going to talk about Arne Slot. Again, I know, sorry, but I just think the way Eddie Howe has handled the Carabao Cup, the Champions League, and the Premier League, and the teams he's played, and the way Arne Slot handled it, there is something to say that Arne Slot needs to learn from Eddie Howe. And more on that later in the show, because I don't want to start talking about the Liverpool manager and his struggles. I want to begin talking about how good Newcastle United were last night. And they were, for me, absolutely brilliant. The link-up play between Nick Woltemade and the rest of his teammates. It is just an absolute joy to watch. Like, oh, is there anything better than Nick Voldemade's quick footwork, bringing others into play, him continuing his run? The one that stood out for me was the Harvey Barnes chance in the first half. Barnes probably should have done better, kind of just takes it a little bit too quickly and hits the side net. And if he takes a little bit more time, I think he did right hitting it first time, but I think he just swipes at it. Maybe he could take a touch and aim for the other side of the goal. As it is, it goes into the side net and an opportunity wasted. But that all comes from Nick Voldemade's quick footwork, a lovely little outside Cruyff turn, if you like, and he plays him in. That comes from the right into the centre and then onto the left. Really nice bit of play. And there was examples of that throughout the game where Voldemade, even though he's the target man, even though he's the centre forward, he's dropping deep, he's bringing others into play, little touches here and there, and he's just an absolute joy to watch. And of course, he got another goal. More on that in a moment, because we're going to talk first off about Fabian Schär's header, because Spurs fans not very happy with it. A little bit controversial. Richarlison got booked as Newcastle United was celebrating because he was adamant that it shouldn't have counted. Interestingly, had VAR been in use, would it have counted? Yeah, definitely, most certainly. Fabian Schär said it best. Where's the rule where you have to stop for a player tying his laces? And actually, when you look back at the replay, Jed Spence down tying his lace. Tonali's got the corner, in the corner between the stand and the Leazer's end. Hands on hips. He's waiting for Jed Spence to get up and get back into position. The referee, whether he's blocked, you can't see Jed Spence on the floor, although I'm not really sure, why he's a referee if he can't see him. He actually waves Tonali on. He says, take the corner. Tonali's got to oblige. The referee's in charge, right? Whips it in, and Schär has a free header. And if you're a Tottenham Hotspur fan and you've stumbled across this podcast, hello, hope you had a safe journey home. I'd be more concerned about the poor defending, because it was shocking defending from you guys. Fabian Schär, unmarked, allowed to head home. Nothing to do with Jed Spence tying his lace. You've got to be more switched on. Great to see Fabian Schär back in the side. He's only out of the side because he's picked up that concussion a few games ago. Malik Thiaw into the starting 11. And oh my goodness me, he's been absolutely superb. And another brilliant night for Malik Thiaw. And it was really interesting to see those two in a partnership, and whether someone can oust Sven Botman going forward. I don't think that's likely. Botman picked up a cut on his head in the last Premier League game, but he wasn't, missing in action last night because of an injury. He was just rested. Did Fabian Schär do enough to get into the starting 11 against West Ham? Well, we'll talk about that in the match preview with John Gibson. My personal opinion is no. I think what it does do is raise that level of competition further, and that's what you want. When you're Fabian Schär and you've played as many games as you have done for Newcastle United consistently as well, to get out of the side, you could kick up a little bit of a fuss maybe. It wouldn't be warranted, but it'd be understandable because you're used to playing week in, week out. But gets an opportunity last night to start, takes it, gets the opening goal, but also looked very, very assured in the back line, picking the passes that he does, defending really well, keeping close to his man. So that just really excites me about the element of competition at centre-back between Malik Thiaw, Sven Botman, Fabian Schär, and of course Dan Burn as well, who is currently at left-back, playing every single game possible, nearly every single minute possible, and doing a decent job at it. But obviously when Lewis Hall comes back, when Tino Livramento comes back, you've got a really big battle at centre-back for two places amongst 4 or 5. Jamal Lascelles as well. Don't forget him. So that element of competition is great, and it's great to see everyone embracing that as well. Barnes had a chance to get the second in the first half. Malik Thiaw up, as he was kind of throughout the game, as really the whole kind of back line were at times, just attacking. Squares it to Harvey Barnes, and Harvey Barnes acrobatically hits it off the bar. Probably should do a little bit better. But as it was, Newcastle went into the interval 1-0 up. And then we see Woltemade get the second goal, a wonderful header, kind of a glancing header, keep that all at sea. But for me, what was really important about this was Joe Willock. And I was impressed with Joe Willock throughout the game. Now, I've been one of his harshest critics because the talent is there. The ability is not in doubt. But we just do not see it. I think if you're being brutally honest, the best of Joe Willock was that loan spell he had before we made the deal permanent. We've seen in glimpses what he's got, but every time we seem to see it in a consistent run, he then picks up an injury. So first things first, we have to hope that those injuries, because they seem to be kind of the same area, muscle, what have you, that he's over them. Because if he gets over them, that's the first hurdle. That's probably the biggest hurdle. Yes, you've got Sandro Tonali. Yes, you've got Joelinton, Lewis Miley, Bruno Guimaraes, all in front of you. But that doesn't matter if you can't even get onto the pitch. He got onto the pitch against Tottenham and he played very, very well. We had bursts of speed down the flanks, down the middle. He was an absolute nuisance all night for Tottenham Hotspur, putting balls into the box, absolutely superb. And he got the assist here. And Woltemade does really well, takes advantage of the keeper coming off his line and just flapping. It's a great, great header. Another goal for the man. I've seen a stat that he's only had 6 shots on target for Newcastle United and scored 6 goals. Haven't checked it out. Let me know in the comments if that is true. Is it sustainable? Probably not. We need other players chipping in with goals, but that's starting to happen. But yeah, a great, great goal for Woltemade to score. And it was interesting, wasn't it, that he started, because you'd automatically assume that Willis Sula would have got the nod. Obviously, if Johan Wissa was fit, he probably would have started. But to start Nick Woltemade, I was a little bit taken back by that because he's played a lot of minutes. He is Newcastle United's only senior striker. He's the man that clearly is the best for that position. And I thought he would have rested him. Now, whether it was because of the task and the opposition in front of him, whether it was because Sula is still suffering from a little bit of an ankle knock, although, again, he had an appearance off the bench and was running down every defender and the goalkeeper when possible, so he doesn't look like he's carrying anything, or whether it's just that Nick Woltemade is kind of a confidence player, and I think he is. I think the way he's going to continue this great form, and it sounds daft saying this, is by scoring goals. I think if you can get him playing every single game, I think he has to score in every single game near enough. Or when he goes on a bad run of form, which will happen, we might see that mood slightly drop. But hey, starts against Spurs, scores against Spurs, brilliant footwork, as I say, dazzles the defence, dazzles you when you watch him. Strong, up for the battle, looking very happy, scoring goals, beautiful. And look, the biggest compliment you can pay is that we're not talking about missing Alexander Isak because we've got Nick Woltemade for nearly half the price. Absolutely wonderful. On Joe Willock, we'll hear from Eddie Howe now because he was asked about it in the press conference. This is what he had to say.
Yeah, really pleased for Joe because we all have very short memories in football. Everything happens so quickly that you forget sometimes how good players can be. Certainly not from our perspective, the coaching side perspective, in terms of underestimating Joe's qualities. We know what a good player he is when he's at his best, and the biggest problem he's had is his body, really, in recent times. But today I thought he looked really fit. He looked very, very good. He covered a lot of ground for us. He was excellent tactically. I played him in a slightly different way today, used him in a slightly different way, but he didn't let us down. He was very good, and delighted with the assist. He could have scored as well, but it's a really good night and a good reminder of how good he can be.
And that is absolutely spot on. It was a good reminder of how good Joe Willock can be. Now, of course, his chances, as I've noted, are going to be few because Newcastle United have a midfield that, when everyone is fit, in Joelinton and Bruno and Tonali, that is the starting 11. You've also got Jacob Ramsey as well, who I forgot to mention earlier, who had a decent enough outing as well. Glimpses there. The competition is fierce in the middle of the park. And it's just really important. The likes of Joe Willock and Jacob Ramsey take their chances, but the biggest compliment you can pay Joe Willock is that we're talking about him over Jacob Ramsey, and those two are probably a little bit neck and neck for that left-hand position of that midfield three alongside Joelinton. So if it's not Big Joe, it's obviously going to be one of those. And at the moment in time, you would say, based on last night's performance, Joe Willock, if indeed it's not Joelinton on Sunday against West Ham, would be in with a shout. But it's all about rotation, isn't it? And really interesting that actually Newcastle United ended up bringing on Bruno, bringing on Joelinton, when you've got so many games coming up. And Newcastle United and Eddie Howe obviously felt comfortable doing that. They were in control of the game, but Eddie Howe just wanted to make sure, and you bring on your best players, he must be confident in their fitness and in their stamina. And, it helped Newcastle United get over the line. We're going to talk about Sandro Tonali now, the other man in the midfield, who started alongside Joe Willock and Jacob Ramsey. Absolutely brilliant. Man of the match. And it's all about his engine. I mean, look, we could remove the title of this podcast. We could remove the date, and you could just listen to this clip of me saying, the engine on that man is absolutely superb. And you could make a comfortable guess of any day of the season so far. And I'm talking about that game that you've picked, because it seems to be nearly every week we talk about how good Sandro Tonali is and how he is the best midfielder in the Premier League. He's just got the legs, the strength, he's got the mind, and then it's all about actually following that through with the right pass, with the right tackle. And he's also got that bit of leadership as well, and that bit of niggle about him, not scared of the fight. It was a brilliant performance from him, especially given, as Eddie Howe revealed in his post-match press conference, that he's been suffering from illness. And Eddie Howe said it knocked him a little bit. So it was quite, a bad illness, but he looked like the Sandro Tonali that we know he is and has proven, especially over the last season. And so 51 passes out of 56, 91% success rate against Tottenham, most touches across the board. It was just a really good performance from Sandro Tonali, and hopefully that illness, he's overcome it, and he'll be starting against West Ham on Sunday. But wow, just give him the keys to the city. Absolutely bloody brilliant. And then, as we say, Fulham next up, quarterfinals, a little we wait until that game comes around. Newcastle United have plenty of games in the calendar to keep them occupied. And it's all going to be about the art of rotation. And just before we get on to that, quick word about Arne Ramsdale. Started against Tottenham as expected, I think, and did very, very well. He had two important saves to make. One low down to his left, the other one kind of a snap save for Richarlison, who got a little bit of a touch onto it. But for me, it was his distribution. 3 or 4 fantastic long kicks down the field, just brought Newcastle United up towards Tottenham's box, up to their area. And that is what Newcastle United are missing when they've got Nick Pope in goal. I don't think there's too much difference between their shot stopping ability. I think they're both excellent shot stoppers, but it is the ability to play with your feet, which might just cost Nick Pope his place. Will it happen against West Ham? I'll be very doubtful, but I could see it happening over the next few weeks, or maybe just that one big mistake Nick Pope will make that he tends to do every so often. Could see Arne Ramsdale come into the Premier League starting 11, but yeah, brilliant with his distribution. There was one moment as well when he rushes out and chests it down and then puts it into touch, and you just think, that's not something Nick Pope's got the belief to do. And that's probably the key word, belief. Arne Ramsdale believes he can do it, believes he can play with the ball at his feet. And I'm not sure Nick Pope believes he can. And if you don't believe, well, then that's a big, big hurdle to overcome. Arne Ramsdale clearly does believe in his own ability, and he proved it last night. And that kicking ability, that comfortable feeling coming out of the box, being a sweeper keeper, is what Newcastle United need, and what could, in the end, get him into that starting 11. Let me know in the comments your thoughts on Arne Ramsdale. Right. Shall we do it? We're going to do it. We're going to talk just briefly about Arne Slot, the Liverpool manager, under a little bit of pressure, and he's lost 6 of his last 7, which is unheard of at Liverpool. They lost 3-0 to Crystal Palace in the Carabao Cup at Anfield. And you have to go back to something like 1934, the last time Liverpool lost by 3 goals or more at Anfield without reply. So that's a long time ago. I mean, not even John Gibson was knocking about back then. That is how far that record stretches. He's a man who is clearly under a little bit of pressure. Is his job a threat? No, not at all. But he's not looking comfortable in it, is he? And I was driving back from St. James's Park last night, had 5 Live on. I was listening to the press conferences, and Arne Slot was doing his. And I just couldn't quite believe what he was saying. It was excuse after excuse after excuse. First off, complaining that he hasn't got the squad, or it's not as big as people may think it. You've spent £400 million in one summer. if not more than that, breaking the British record twice. And your squad isn't good enough to handle European games, Premier League and Domestic Cup. That's on you. That's on you in Liverpool Football Club. That's bad buying in the market. No one else to blame but yourselves on that. Look, he made 10 changes against Crystal Palace, right? He then has the audacity to complain about the fixtures, talking about 2 days turnaround and, European games and then the Premier League and then domestic cups. Well, we're there. Isn't that exactly what Eddie Howe and Newcastle United are doing? This is the point I want to make. The way Eddie Howe is handled balancing that busy schedule, Arne Slot could take a leaf from Eddie Howe. He could take some notes and he could learn a lot from him because Eddie Howe hasn't complained. Eddie Howe hasn't berated the calendar gods, the fixture gods for giving them quick turnarounds and 3 games in a week, because this is where you want to be as a top manager. As a football club, you want this. If you're successful, you know you're going to play a load of games in a week. You know it's going to be busy and you just get on with it. You know you're going to get suspensions. You know you're going to get injuries. You know you're going to get poor form. You just get on with it. Eddie Howe is capable of that. You'll never hear him making excuses publicly. You will never hear him do it. Arne Slot will sit there for 40 minutes doing it. And I have to say, it's laughable given the fact that he made 10 changes, given the fact that he's spent all that money. It is absolutely laughable. Injuries, by the way, and Liverpool have a few. No getting away from that. But Newcastle have some as well. Newcastle have their first choice right back in Tino Livramento out, their first choice left back in Lewis Hall out, and Johan Wissa hasn't even kicked the ball. And he would be arguably in, or would have been in, for first choice striker, allowing Woltemade to settle. And yet, Eddie Howe doesn't bring that up every single press conference. Eddie Howe just gets on with it. Look, good managers deflect. Bad managers make excuses. But the best managers just get on with the job, no matter the hand they are dealt. And Eddie Howe, we know which category he gets into. Arne Slot, not so much. And by the way, as well, right, he talks about not wanting to play senior players and how he couldn't play them because they've got a European game coming up after the Premier League this weekend. Dan Burn, right? How many minutes has this man played? He's played nearly every single game this season, if not every single game, and very rarely gets substituted. He's been absolutely brilliant. Now, yes, okay, if Newcastle United had Lewis Hall or Tino Livramento, he probably wouldn't be playing every single game. But Eddie Howe doesn't have that. So then he's backing on the players to get through. But not only that, he's believing in the players. He's picking his strongest team. He's not making excuses. That's the bottom line. And it's just absolutely infuriating that Arne Slot sits there, makes these excuses, and then doesn't get kind of brought up on it within the press room. Obviously, pundits later do it and what have you, and I get it. It's not maybe the ideal opportunity. And it's good to see the likes of BBC questioning whether, Slot was right in what he said. But Dan Burn, for example, right, he's played 1,170 minutes this season, okay? 9 Premier League games, 3 Champions League games, and 1 in the EFL Cup, which, of course, is the Carabao Cup. And he'll be playing on Sunday against West Ham. Eddie Howe is not afraid to pick senior players for the Carabao Cup, takes it seriously, And if it went wrong, he'd hold his hands up and say, I picked the wrong team. He wouldn't berate the calendar. He wouldn't say this is what we've done in the past. We played youngsters. Exactly. Eddie Howe just gets on with the job, and Arne Slot could really, really take a lesson or two from Eddie Howe. Let me know in the comments your thoughts on Slot, on Liverpool, the man under pressure, 10 changes, a load of youngsters, a bench that no one had heard of. But it's not his fault, is it? No, apparently not. Hey. Oh well, we're celebrating Newcastle United through to the quarterfinals of the League Cup. We've got a great manager who doesn't want to make excuses. He just gets on with the task in front of him. And right now, he's doing it very, very well. We're going to have the match preview with John Gibson. We're going to have the view from the opposition coming as well from Tom Rennie. You'll probably remember him from last season when he berated Lopetegui, and then West Ham ended up winning the game. So hopefully he doesn't do the same about Nuno, and they end up winning on Sunday. But what we want to see now is the home form getting carried on to the road. Newcastle yet to win away from St James's Park this season. In fact, yet to win away since fifth victory over Leicester last season. Great at home, looking comfortable, not yet at their best. We need to see them now transfer that to away games. Perfect opportunity with the way West Ham are at the moment, although Sunday kickoff, big travel, not a great stadium to go to for the atmosphere and what have you, but fingers crossed they can pick up a victory on the road, set themselves up nicely for Bilbao. But yes, Newcastle United through to the quarterfinals of the League Cup. Meanwhile, Arne Slot crying into his cornflakes because it hasn't quite worked out for him. Have a wonderful rest of the day.